Hey everybody, experience, experience, experience. As the brewing industry continues to evolve, creating memorable and successful events has become even more crucial. Today, I'm excited to be joined by guests from breweries, a guest that focuses on helping you create more memorable event displays, and one person who has experience on both the marketing side of things, but also as a brewery owner. So now let's meet our panelists. And Megan, you get to go first.
All right, thanks, Andrew. I'm Megan Bachemin. I am the marketing and events manager for a tap room based out of Greensboro, North Carolina, and newly opened in Boone, North Carolina, called SouthEnd Brewing.
I love going into Boone, North Carolina. How often do you get to make the trip back and forth?
It's kind of slowed down the last few months, but I'm hoping to make some more excuses to get back up there in the spring. But when we were getting ready to open and everything, I was up there quite frequently.
Just the outdoors in that area are gorgeous.
Yes.
Warren, your turn.
Hi, I'm Warren with Beer Marketeers and also Woodfoot Beer Company. I've been in the beer industry now for about 11 years total, from distribution all the way to now owning the marketing company side of things, and then starting my own brew pub in Fort Walton Beach, Florida.
So, Warren, often the longer we all work in the industry, the less likely it becomes that we're going to open a brewery of our own. You made the opposite choice. What motivated you to actually take the next steps and open your own brew pub?
The right people were involved, and the fact that we have what we feel like the business experience side and the marketing side, and the biggest focus for us was finding someone who could make the quality of beer, kind of bringing all those pieces together, and then having the other partners who are in the restaurant world and in the hospitality world already, and owners of the building and so on. It just kind of it was too good to be true, and we're not a big brewery by any means. We're going to be a little brew pub, so I think it's the model these days that's probably the better one, I would assume, from our research.
So, Warren, like years ago, I think you were on a panel with me and some others about when your brewery should ask for help. And we kind of talked about the dreaded C word, like consultants. But it sounds like your crew is all the people who wear the hats that you need to have when running a brewery.
Yeah. I was taught a long time ago that I was not good at everything, and that you should hire and or work with people who are better at things than you are. And I know what I'm good at. I know that I can always learn what I'm good at, but I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. And so that's the big focus, and that's exactly how it happened. We decided to do it because we had four of us who were good at something else, and then we hired the main person who was great at the thing that we definitely can't do, and that's make beer.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Warren. Anthony, always great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. How you doing?
Doing well.
So my name's Anthony. I'm a director of hospitality for Monday Night Brewing. So I help oversee all of our 6 locations throughout the Southeast, and also help with opening new ones, as well as on the private event side and public events. So help oversee and make sure that all those are going off without a hitch.
And you probably put more miles in your car than anyone I know.
There's a lot of driving and a lot of audiobooks involved.
What are you listening to right now? Any recommendations for everyone listening?
Probably nothing that I could say during this live chat. Nothing educational.
Well, you know what? It's good to disconnect sometimes from this beery lives we all live.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have an escape sometimes.
Love it. Matt, your turn. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Matt with Strike Visuals. So we make custom branded event supplies, pop-up tents, all that, table covers, those kind of things. Been selling into the beer space for.
And Matt, somehow your audio went out. I'm glad it's not Strike Audios, or that doesn't really work out. But I think, are you there? No, Matt, your audio's out. We'll let you fix that up. We'll get everybody else kind of dive into this conversation. But Matt and the team at Strike did some awesome signage for CBP Connects over the past couple of years. So if you saw the branding behind the stage or the schedules we had posted everywhere, Strike is responsible for making that, or the table covers. They do really, really cool things. So it's been a pleasure to get to know them on that level, but also learn from Matt's insight. And Matt, can we hear you?
Is that good now?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah. So I've been in the beer space about 7-8 years now, but we sell into lots of industries. So a little bit of perspective, probably done 100, 200 events in the last 7-8 years, probably.
You know a little bit about events. So everybody, let's dive in. Breweries are doing more and more events, but I'd love to hear from each of your perspectives. How has consumer behavior changed in the past year, and what should breweries consider when planning events? Just really high level in this one. I'd love to hear kind of how the consumers changed and what they want out of events. And at this point, anybody jump right in.
Yeah, so I can start. Sure. I think the experience side, right? So you kind of started with that experience. I actually wrote that down, so I'm kind of freaked out that you actually said this. But basically, I don't think it was just in the past year. So to me, it's been slowly happening for many years now. Consumers become more attached to that experience versus what is at the event, right? I know at one point in time, you could create this hype beer festival and bring all these really cool breweries in town and really badass beers and all this, and it would sell the tickets, or it would help you sell the tickets. Well, I've seen those start to kind of go downhill in sales, right? Now it's all about those events that, one, if you establish an experience in that type of event originally, then you're still probably fine. But to me, it's the events that have a little bit of that, but also mix that high quality experience, right? What is the reason why someone's there other than just beer, right? Are they enjoying themselves a certain way? Is there food? Is there maybe some music in the background? Even if the atmosphere is set up right, to me that's kind of the big thing you should think about when considering events. Don't focus so much on what we see happen a lot with the hype fests is people focusing on just the breweries and the beers that are going to be there, and they spend so much money getting them there, and they spend so much effort entertaining those people that then all of a sudden the event kind of just goes, meh, the ticket sales aren't there.
Yeah.
Megan, how about you?
Yeah, I would say too, I feel like, for the longest time, recurring events and things that people could kind of like count on happening were the bread and butter. But we're starting to see that people are getting more excited and more involved in the one-offs as well. So, just having something going on that you have happen once a year, it's smaller, or once a quarter. And it kind of reminds people that you're still there. They're used to seeing that thing that you have recurring weekly, like trivia. But when something new pops up, they just get super excited, and the conversation starts to happen of, oh, when's the last time we were there? Yeah, let's go check it out. So you're kind of cultivating that, that 80-20 rule a little bit more on the return business side.
Megan, how would you say that your audience differs when you have, say, the recurring events like trivia versus the quarterly larger events that happen a little less frequently?
I feel like, the trivia crowd, it turns into your regulars crowd, or like your reoccurring event crowd turns into your regulars crowd. Because you can pretty much count on them being there for Run Club for trivia, and then probably being there a couple other days of the week, because it is something that feels more natural and home to them. And then with some of those larger events or less frequent events, we're just seeing so many new faces, and we're seeing like oh, I've been here forever and I keep meaning to check you guys out, and this just felt like a good reason to. And then they're kind of finding like okay, I've seen the exciting side, let me come back and see the normal side. And so then they become a little bit more on that regular side.
Love it. Anthony, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, very similar, backing up kind of what Warren and Megan have already said, is that we tend to be focusing on the quarterly and monthly events. So we break them kind of up into what of our weekly programming, our monthly programming, and then our big quarterly events that we're going to be hosting. And a lot of the events that we've seen that are actually very successful are events that we're primarily giving back to the community, where we're not necessarily focusing on like, hey, how much money are we going to make from this event, but just like, hey, let's give back and have a good time. So we've seen those work, and we kind of bounce we have a basis for all of our events that we host, and we call them our 3 C's. So making sure it's a good connection with the community. There's good creativity and craftsmanship with the beer and any type of event we're hosting. And if it doesn't check all 3 of those boxes, then we kind of scrap it and we move on to the next idea.
So Anthony, you and I are like on the same wavelength. I'm prepping for the CBC panel. I'll be leading with some people about adding food to the tap room, and we have 3 C's that we go over too.
Really? That's awesome.
I'll share it with you later.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
Matt, I'd love to lean on you to kind of hear what you're seeing with regard to what people want for beer events, but you have so much knowledge outside the beer industry. So just kind of speak to, the beer side of things, but also your overall perspective, what people are looking for in general for events.
I think the biggest thing is just awareness, not getting forgot in a competitive landscape, whatever industry you're talking about. I mean, the marketing you can do around that event, whether it's social, whether it's direct to the consumer or whatever type of event it is. I mean, that's what we're always trying to figure out when we're going across 10, 12, 15 different industries, just making sure we're staying top of mind in those industries. And you got to do things to stay there. If you're quiet, you're just going to get left behind. So I think that awareness is the main component, and just getting your name out there and engagement.
Is there any industry that you interact with that's really impressing you right now for whatever reason?
Man,
give me the weirdest one you got that we can learn something from.
No, I mean, beverage is my big boy. I mean, I've been doing more on the bev net side of things, just like the overall beverage side of things, and just seeing all the innovation and stuff. That one's kind of crazy, and I mean, this is beer centric, and there's a lot of beer there too, but just all the different ideas and the new stuff that's happening. And I know beer is trying to stay in that mix by getting pretty unique as well. So that one just stands out as far as the craziness that's going on there, and new stuff all the time,
That's a really fantastic point. So for everyone else, are you trying to attract the non-beer drinker to these events? And if so, what are you doing to give them that sense of urgency to come to your brewery, despite maybe them not being a beer drinker?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We like to think that our events are for everyone, and we kind of keep that in mind when we're hosting an event. One of our more successful ones we do is we call it Carve in the Courtyard. We host it at all of our locations, where we just give out free pumpkins for families, right? So that's when we bring in extra food option for kids vendors. Like, we like to think of it as the coolest kid's birthday party on in the Southeast, right? And that's kind of how we plan those events. So just how do we incorporate everything and make sure we have an option available for both parents and kids?
So Anthony, I've got a 4-year-old, and we've been playing way too much Candyland lately. And as I was thinking about, tap rooms and my kids' activity, I love to find ways I can compare what my kids doing with what something a brewery should do. Has any brewery ever had like an unofficial world championships of Candyland? Because I feel like, for some brewery, it could work. If you don't like kids at your brewery, completely ignore what I said and don't hate on me. But I feel like it could work on a Sunday morning.
I feel like it would end in fist fights. Candyland's an unforgiving game. I mean, you gotta go for keeps when you're playing that one.
I like it. No, back to you, Warren. You're getting ready to say something?
No. I was thinking of those type of events that Anthony mentioned being and also it kind of goes back to what Megan said in the first question of having those fun one-off events that might attract other people to your business, and whether or not you have maybe you do have some other offerings for them, or maybe it's a way to introduce them to a beer that they might like, right? Maybe they just thought they weren't a beer person and they hadn't had a chance to try it. Or maybe you have some wines or some seltzers or some THC infused beverages or whatever it is at your place that you want to know, like, hey, look, we got you. Like, come hang out with your friends. Don't be shy. Bring your friends who do like beer here. You can come and you can enjoy yourself too. And a lot of those events, if you can get really unique with those events, you're attracting more people to your brand. Whether or not they drink beer sometimes doesn't hurt you, just because at the end of the day, even if they don't drink beer, maybe they recommend you to a friend that does drink beer, and then that friend comes, right?
Or in your case, Warren, maybe your brew pub becomes their favorite restaurant despite the fact that they don't enjoy beer.
Sure. Yeah. Eat the food. It's better margin.
Megan, what about on your end at SouthEnd? Are you attracting the non-beer drinkers, and what are you offering them, and what's their itch for coming to your spot?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Warren just hit on is, for every non-beer drinker out there, they know a beer drinker. So, even if they don't bring their beer drinking friends to that particular event for whatever reason, they're still going to tell them about it, talk about it, post about it. And, they're going to garner that attention for the folks that do have, that interest in checking out new breweries in the area. But it's also, a mix of what you can offer to. So if you have another niche, like being a brew pub, we're a brew pub too, so if we can tie something into being more food related and bring out foodies, we'll do that too.
It seems like this conversation is going to feature 2 words a lot. We've already said experience a billion times, but I'm also hearing variety and just like mixing it up. So when it comes to the events that you all do, Warren, what you're planning to do, and Matt, kind of what you're just observing from your perspective, what does your mix look like for events? Do you have what percentage of those small recurring events, like I mentioned, trivia? When do you start to get to medium-sized events, maybe like a market, or those large events like anniversaries that require investment and effort? Do you have a plan for each of how many you plan to do each year? What's that look like when your back-end schedule of how you kind of craft this out?
Yeah. So if you're asking me specifically, you just mentioned my name. So I love the small events, but I would also say it's just like number one, do the research around you too when you're planning these small events, right? Figure out who's doing trivia, who's doing whatever that other event might be, and then figure out if trivia even lines up with who you are. Maybe bingo is more fun for your people because it's easier, it's more approachable, right? Like I'm not a trivia person because I don't have that random knowledge. My business partner, he's the guy that I would call to be my trivia partner, right? So in my brain, you can still have a lot of fun small events to make sure that you're hitting those that you want to have the regular things. And the other side of it is figure out what the balance looks like between events and potential specials or combos or whatever that looks like too. Because maybe you don't need to do a big event that costs you extra money to have a trivia person there. Maybe it's as simple as having a cool pie and pint special or something to that effect. And then on the planning the events and planning the bigger events and even the medium events, I would say get some kind of back-end tool to help you stay organized. You know where I'm going with that, Andrew.
We'll get into that a little bit later. I have the questions, teed up for you in about 30 minutes.
Yes. So just that's what I would say though is stay organized. Have it somewhere where you can track it all and make sure that you're measuring your success of your events in whatever way that you need to do that for your business.
To touch on just staying organized, like having that sort of touch base after the event, because if it's something that was successful and you think you're going to want to do it in another couple quarters or the next year, you're going to forget how it went come that time next year, right? So immediately after it's done, going back into whatever you're using to help you plan and putting down those notes, that didn't work, we have to call this person next time, or that was a huge success, make sure we have more staff for it, whatever the case may be. And that way when you're kind of on your forecast for next year, you're not having to sit back and ask staff or go back to social media and read comments and try to figure out how it went.
So Megan, you make me want to dive down that rabbit hole right now of just evaluating success for these events. What does that look like for you? You have an event. What data are you looking at? What notes are you taking? Tell me about your systems.
I'm a really analytical person, so I probably do a lot more than the layperson would. But most of the time I'm constantly refreshing the back end of our POS to see how things are going at certain times of day and like certain categories. We really break down things in our POS. So there's a little bit more of like a granular level that we can see, how things are doing over the hour by hour, and see where that shift comes. And when that shift comes, does that mean that we need to do something differently within that time? Because at some point, especially being a brew pub, you're going to see a huge shift in when food and beer kind of start to go the other direction, right? And figuring out what that looks like in the overall schedule of your event. I do a lot of sort of like, I won't say like focus groups because I'm not pulling them in just for that, but we have a strong enough following now that, I can catch up with some of the folks that were there in the following days and ask them more pointed questions, not just the, hey, how was it? Like, if that's somebody that you see in your tap room a lot, you can get a little bit more personal with them on figuring out, from their perspective as a customer, what went well. And now I'm just to the point where some of our regulars will come find me and be like, I've got 3 points I need to touch on, and so they know I'm going to ask it, and they know, while they're there for the event that there's something that they're going to tell me. And I think that that's important too, because sometimes what you're seeing on black and white paper or on the computer screen does not relay to the customer experience. So don't leave that part out.
Yeah, and for anyone who's ever ran an event before, we all know what it's like. You're there, you're present, you meet a ton of great people, but you don't get to enjoy it at the capacity that an actual guest does. But you're proud of it at the end. I think that's important. You should definitely feel proud. So Megan, like when you're talking to all these guests and getting their insight, is there anything that they've shared with you that was just mind-blowing or impacted the way that you plan and schedule, whether all your events or maybe a single?
Yeah, I think we've had a few instances where, I'm sitting back looking at something thinking, oh gosh, that could have gone a lot better, or wow, that went really well. And then a customer comes up to me afterwards and they're like, just so you know. And one of the biggest feedbacks I've gotten, like we always kind of fight with sound in our area. We're kind of on the back end of an alleyway. We use a huge parking lot with a building behind it. Sound reverberates off that wall, that building a lot. And we use that large parking lot for events and things like that. So I'm always kind of like walking. I have a decibel meter on my phone. Like I'm constantly checking the decibel of different areas of the grounds and in the tap room. And almost always I will have somebody tell me that music is too loud, and I'm expecting that, and which is why I walk around with decibel readers. And I had a great band come out for the first time. I took a huge chance on them. Like they just seemed amazing. In their videos and in their social media. And I booked them for a large event, and it was a huge chance. And I had people saying, is there any way that you can make it so I can hear it all the way over here? And I was like, wait, what? It's not loud? And they're like, it's not loud enough. I need more of this. So that was kind of like, that reassuring moment of, wow, you took a huge chance on that band, and now you're getting sort of like the opposite of what you would expect from your regular crowd. So that's exciting. And then I think too, a lot of times it's when your regulars are kind of like, I didn't expect to not be able to get a seat right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry you can't get a seat right now, but that was kind of my goal, like in more ways or less. That was kind of my goal, is that you might be a little bit, crammed for space at the moment. So
we'll dive into marketing and messaging later, because I think it's definitely important to make sure those regulars are aware that you might have the loudest band on the planet playing on Saturday, so they avoid it and come on a slower Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Anthony, I'd love to learn a little bit about the mix you do across your locations, and follow up to that. Do you find you see unique trends, what customers want at different Monday nights?
Yeah, absolutely. Each market has their own demographic, different type of people that are coming. And I mean, what I'd say one of the biggest things that we've seen with success is just saying yes to a lot of events, because a lot of us have a bunch of different groups approach each one of the tap rooms saying like, hey, I have a great idea for an event. This is what we're going to do. And this is like, I have this all set up. And just saying yes. Like our biggest example of that is like this group called Controllerize comes into our Atlanta locations every single Monday, once a week. And they come in past close, and they approached us with this great idea for an event for introverted extroverts. And so it's a bunch of people that love anime, hip hop, lo-fi beats, all that good stuff. Like all the local artists come out, and they just use our taproom space in a time that we normally wouldn't be open. Right. So we just worked out a deal with them. We give them the taproom space on us, and we get all the bar sales. And it's just like this wonderful mutual relationship that just formed over us just saying yes to a group of people that approached us with a very informal plan in place, right? And so like that event does really well in Atlanta. We've tried to replicate that in other city and other markets, and it just hasn't hit the same way. So it definitely depends on the demographics of where you're looking at hosting these events as well.
And on your side of things, Anthony, how are you monitoring the success? What metrics do you really lean on?
That's a good question. So we typically will run a P&L afterwards, figure out what exactly we spent. I'd say one of the biggest issues we ran into early on is what we considered and thought of success is because we look at that P&L and figure out, all right, we spent X amount of money, we made Y amount of money, right? And it came out in the green, and we were like, oh, that's all fine and dandy. But what we weren't looking at was the opportunity cost of our marketing team with, could they have been doing designs for our can labels? Did they delay other projects because they were focusing on putting out this? Did our taproom managers get behind on their daily functions because they were trying to book all these vendors and events? We're looking at the overall picture and just stepping back and asking ourselves, was the juice worth the squeeze for this event, right? There's like, how much man hours and how much brain capacity did we put towards hosting this event for making like $2,000 on the bottom line, right? Where it's just kind of like, all right, maybe we move on from that event and try something different.
I think the most common thing that I see with regard to what you just said is, a brewery that adds a band on a Saturday afternoon. You've got a band, you got to pay an extra $1,000 to, and you don't get anyone else in the tap room for that. And while it's nice to have, is it really necessary? Do you have any events that you've experienced, Anthony, where you've added in something event-like and just got rid of it because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze?
Yeah, actually, the prime example, and I'm thinking about revisiting this, so I don't know if other people are going to steal it, but we used to host an adult prom back in the day. So we host bands. We'd get a staging company to come out, put a stage out for the band, lighting, all this good stuff. So it was prom for people who were over 21 who may have not gone to prom when they were younger, but now there's alcohol involved, which obviously didn't happen at any of our high school proms. And it was a good time, but we didn't really make too much money on the bottom line of that. And we're just like, all right, we've all put in like 3-4 weeks worth of effort with hosting this event. So let's kind of pull it back a little bit and reconsider.
No, thanks for sharing that. Sound like a fun event. Sorry it didn't go, exactly the way I had planned.
I know, right? I'm thinking about revisiting it, so maybe soon.
So Matt, I'd kind of love to hear your insight. What are you seeing companies do with regard to a successful mix of those smaller recurring events versus larger, one-offs in your world? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I've got a good mix. I mean, I've got my 3 to 4 heavyweight deals I do every year, like CBC and a couple others in other industries, and those take an insane amount of planning. To the points earlier, I'm doing meetings once a week for 2 months leading up, looking at all cost and roles and things like that. But I'm always trying to find other stuff and just dipping my toe in to see, whether I just go walk a show. Mine's a little bit more B2B and those type of things than what you guys are putting on the actual events, but I've been to quite a few of those. But yeah, I mean, putting the appropriate amount of time for the big ones, and then for the small ones, just go show up and talk to as many people as possible, get ideas and just see what the potential is there before you put too much more time and money into it. But that's what I hear from people all the time at events is you got to try new stuff and go ask a lot of questions, just get people's feedback. I mean, I'm at, like I said, 3 or 4 big ones a year, and then another 10 to 15 that I'm always exploring.
In my past life, I ran a food service that worked across stadiums, arenas, indoor, outdoor events. And I used to always take what I thought were fairly decent notes. That way, when the event came around the next year, I could make it more successful. And one of the metrics that I added to my event recaps that wasn't initially there was I would write down the weather. It wasn't something I would initially think about, but it's a big difference if you're hosting an outdoor market and it's 75 and sunny versus 50 degrees and snowing. For all of you, are there any metrics that you find valuable that most people may not think about that have helped you better plan your events?
I know for me, I'm always trying to make at least 3 to 4 other metrics. Like ROI is what everybody's out for, but for me, I've got a longer sales cycle. You guys are selling beer at the events and you can run that quick P&L. For me, it might be 6 months before I can really tell if that event has ROI, sometimes a year or even 2. So I'm trying to make metrics on, I mean, as simple as people I talk to and just as many small metrics as I can to really evaluate how the event went, what I can control, because for me, sometimes it just takes 1 to pay off, but that could take 6 months. And I was at an event last week with 2,300 exhibitors. So hard to stand out there. I mean, I was just talking to people nonstop. And what I kept telling myself is the next big one's right around the corner, even if it got a little slow or whatever. To me, that positive mindset, no matter how it's looking in the moment, is one of the most important things by far. Just knowing that, hey, you got to stay up, you got to stay sharp. And any metrics you can make to track along that, to me, are super valuable.
That's one of the big ones that we kind of look for too is not too crazy, but really playing around with when you're posting for events, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram or stuff like that. Like play around with how soon do you post it or how late do you post it, right? Because if it's a family event, you're not going to want to post it the week of the event for the very first showing because people with kids need time to plan, right? It's not just let me just pick up my kids and go, right? It's a whole thing. Andrew, you could probably attest to that. It's not just, all right, we're up and out, right? You got to prep for the weekend ahead.
Sometimes the up and out's a nice way to go. What are we doing today? Oh, we're walking to the brewery.
Yeah. But yeah, just figuring out when we're posting, social engagement, what's being successful for what types of events, because it's not all going to be a one-size-fit-all answer, depending on the event that you're hosting.
We're going to dive into that one in just a minute, a little bit deeper on marketing. Warren or Megan, anything else to add into any KPIs you're monitoring?
So I think to that point too is keeping in mind not necessarily like a really tangible KPI, but how you're building or what the success of the event might be about the experience that people had at the event, right? So to me, sometimes there are events that are, a lot of breweries and places get too involved in the ROI on some of the events. And sure, you want to make sure you don't lose money, you want to make money on it, but sometimes that event, or maybe the first couple of versions of that event, are about really establishing the experience, especially when you're coming up with a new big event, a new anniversary party type event, or a new bigger one. You want to establish that this event is high quality. And then what will happen over time is that people will come to realize that it's high quality. And we've seen this ourselves with our event that we put on in Florida that's not associated with any brands at all. Every year, we sell out now, and it's 850 people. We cap tickets. We keep it the same. But
you got to tell us, what kind of event is this, Warren, for everyone who's not aware?
miss a beer fest. Yeah, I have it as, you know, more to talk about on it later. But I mean, the idea of it though is really just, sure, like we're raising money for charity, and that's great. But we started off focusing on raising the money for charity, and then focusing on the experience, what people were there to do and enjoy, and the beers that we had and the breweries that we get from all over the country. That was a huge priority for us too, and to make sure we had some fun stuff people didn't have. But at the end of the day, we see a lot of people try to replicate that in brewery-based events and stuff like that. And a lot of times they get so focused on just the money that's coming in versus, okay, like I need to make sure we make this much, but let's build this experience up before charging people an asinine amount of money to come to this event because we think it's important or we think it's worth $200 or $150. You know, come up with a good value on the price and like make that your focus, make the experience worth the dollars. And that could be a metric that you measure too, right?
Yeah, I think touching on that, and it's exactly what I was going to bring up before you even started what you were saying, Warren, and it just relates so well, is like part of the experience, especially for a brew pub, is what they're doing with their time, you know. So if you were busy, great. If you were busy because people can't get beer fast enough or can't get food fast enough, that's not so great. You know, so like an example for us, our first year doing like a big Oktoberfest celebration after COVID and everything, you know, it was a lot larger of a turnout than I think we could have ever anticipated and everything we hoped for. But then when you like roll down into the metrics again from a granular level, and you're like, oh wow, average ticket time was an hour and a half on food. You know, we didn't sell as much Oktoberfest as we were hoping. What kind of led to that? And you know, so then some of the changes for the next year were cutting down to a streamlined, you know, menu that offered not more of our normal things, but more of an Oktoberfest type situation. Having Oktoberfest on more taps the next year, so that way we were selling more of it because it was pouring faster at a faster rate. So those things, you know, I feel like then we felt as busy, but the numbers were higher because they were having more out of their time while they were there. So
Megan, that's a really interesting point because you touch on, you know, beer lines might have been too long. People took a little longer than you had intended to for them to receive their food. Have you ever got to a point where you've realized an event's too big and maybe we shouldn't promote it as much?
No, my goal is always, you know, bigger is better as long as you're, you know, being safe and have good crowd control and have thought of all the, you know, possible outcomes. But there's definitely been other events I've attended at breweries where I've literally turned to my partner and said, we got to go. This is way too busy and is now officially unsafe. And that's never a position I want myself to be in. And I also don't ever want to be in a position where I'm turning people away at the door. So I feel like there is sort of that nice, like, chemistry that you have to create ahead of time of like, yes, you want as many people in the door as possible, but you might not want everybody to stay for 5, 6, 7 hours. You know, maybe you want them, depending on what the type of event is, maybe you want them in and out in 2 hours like a normal meal because you're just going to replace their seat. So
that's fantastic insight there. And I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You talked about how these quarterly, yearly events are an opportunity to get people who might not currently be your regulars in. So you're successfully getting them to come to your, say, quarterly events. How are you getting them to come back after those events? Like, how are you creating that connection at that event to make them want to become a regular?
honestly, I think it's just the fact that like whatever led them to find you for that event is getting them in front of your audience for other things as well. So you might have another event coming up that is along the same lines as far as like your expected audience. Or, you know, because they found your cookies and beer pairing, they didn't realize that you also have a book club. So now they're coming back for book club and things like that. So you're kind of starting that relationship with them on that one-off, you know, event or that quarterly event. And then it's just making sure that that one-off event is not so one-off that it's never going to make them want to come back again. Like it still has to be kind of in line with some of the other things that you're hoping to accomplish and the vibes that you're trying to give off, but maybe not, you know, such a secular market that you're only going to see them the same time next year.
So I was going to ask a question somewhat based on what you just concluded with. So we talk about our regulars. You have the guests that come just for your food sometimes. You have the guests who are definitely seeking out your beer. Do you find that any of you have the guests who strictly come to events because that's what they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, absolutely. We call them our socialites, right? The people that just want to go out and be seen. They don't really necessarily care about the beer or anything else. They're just there for the vibes and the experience, right? And nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but absolutely those people.
Yep. I'll most likely know who those people are because they're one of the only people that might tag us in their Instagram stories, but they only ever tag us in their Instagram stories when they're here for an event. And that's because that's the only time that they're here. And I'll take it, because maybe our normal everyday market is not the type that's going to take a picture of their beer and put it on Instagram.
That'd be a lot of beers on Instagram.
I think you have those people, and then you have the folks. I would even sometimes call myself this when it's not work related, that have like 3 kids like me, who it's the time where I can go out and do it. Even if I pop by for an hour or two, I'm like, sure, I could go over there on a regular day, but it's a lot harder to be like, okay, see you later. I'm going to go to this random brewery and just sit there for an hour or two. I mean, now it's not because of beer marketeers and it's work, but it sometimes could be, and it can be. Whereas if it's a big event that I know I'm going to have a lot of friends at, or a lot of people, in my case that I work with or want to work with, then it's a lot easier to go, hey, I'm gonna go hit this event. So I think there's a balance there. Like, some of it's the people who are just the socialites, some of it's your regulars, some of it's the people who just they get the chance to go out on that one event because they can get a babysitter, or because their significant others like, yeah, go ahead, go and have fun. Like, you deserve this event. Go enjoy yourself. I'll pick you up later. And hopefully the 3 kids haven't dragged me into the ground.
Yeah, getting the most out of your time there.
Just to backtrack too, Andrew, on what you were talking about and converting those kind of the socialites that are going to the one-off events, right, into those regulars. What I see very frequently with a lot of event venues is that if they're hosting a big one-time event and then you go into the bathroom, right, most places have posters hung up in the bathroom, in their tap rooms, etc., is that it's still the same event poster for the event you're hosting that day, right? So making sure that all of your printed marketing material is up to date for that large event, for what's coming next, as opposed to just keeping it in their day of. And also what's really important is having your weekly marketing schedule. So what you're hosting, your trivia days, your bingo days, whatever you may be hosting in your tap room, up and very clearly visible for our guests, right? Those people that may not see it be like, oh, they do bingo on Wednesday. I love bingo. You want to come by? Those little things really add up and really matter.
And one more thing on that too, I think for ticketed events where you are collecting emails, very easy to send emails out. Even if you want to not maybe put them in your main newsletter, but in your event letter where you're going to say, this is my event group. This is everybody who's ever bought a ticket to one of our events. And you just send that newsletter out to them and let them know the big events coming up, because then you're targeting those people who care about big events potentially.
So I want to mix it up a little bit. We've talked a lot about events, and I think we're referring to them as having a theme, having a purpose, a trivia night, a concert, market, anniversary party. Matt, I'd love to hear from you about, the atmosphere and how things like the decor, the props, impact the success of an event. Everyone else, I'd love to learn, how you're complementing the events that you do with everything around the guest, not just what's actually happening. But Matt, start us off with that one.
Yeah, of course, our specialty is making you look good. And what do they say? People are going to formulate an opinion in, I don't know, anywhere from half a second to 7 seconds on whether they're going to come up and engage with you. So, that's what we're trying to do, is make you stand out. And I mean, super important. If you don't get that initial engagement, you didn't come to play at all. They're moving on to somebody else. So obviously that's what we're trying to do as our company is make you look good and tell your story. To me, it's a mix of looking good and making sure you get that opportunity. Then once they engage, it's maximizing what you do when they're there. So to me, it's about 50-50 on that initial impression. And then, storytelling to me is the best thing you can do once you get them in there, which you can do combo visually and obviously just talking to people from there.
What's an example of a time you've worked with a brewery to provide some sort of visual to maximize the guest experience?
I mean, that's kind of what we do all the time. I mean,
I've
gotten feedback from some breweries that were like, oh, that design or that, kind of how we laid things out, we're selling a lot more of this like inflatable furniture because we're saying, hey, once you know, the tent or whatever, the flags or whatever, draw them in, but you want them to stay, right? And then you get to tell your story. So we've got this furniture that's branded that people can sit on and you know, just lounge for a little while. People want that lounge vibe to where then they can interact with you. You can actually tell them about your beers, you know, and actually stay for a little while. The longer they stay, the better it's going to be for you.
Has Strike dove into bounce houses yet?
We can do it. I mean, we can do inflatables, pretty much anything. You know, we do the arches, but we can do the beer cans. And yeah, I mean,
I'm going to pitch you to a local brewery to get a branded bounce house. We'll make that happen and get a picture out there.
Yeah, we got a slide. I mean, so, you know.
Love it. So for everyone else, you know, on the brewery side of things, is there anything you do in addition to the concept, like for visuals that make the event more impressive?
I think, you know, you talk about decor. So if it's a big event, like big anniversary party, there is a chance there that you can decorate and make it a little bit more, you know, a different experience, even for the people who are your regulars. At the same time, I think it's still important, not necessarily on the decor side, but on the atmosphere side, kind of to what Megan was saying earlier, of making sure that there are multiple beer stations, that beers are flowing, that it's easy to get your glass. If it's a big, you know, ticket fest side, if it's, you know, there's not too many big long lines that people are waiting in. Bathrooms, right? I mean, simple stuff that a lot of people putting on events kind of sometimes can overlook, right? The idea of having where someone comes and they can enjoy that, you know, that quick beer, and then while they're doing that, they have a place that's comfortable to relax, even if it's not necessarily seating because it's packed out, but maybe outside there's some umbrellas that they're able to be under, or a tent with some shade, especially in you know, in some of this the more southern you get. I know in certain times of year it's miserable, right? And so, you know, just some beach umbrellas that are up in the you know, side of your building potentially make a difference for someone where they can sit down and hide under an umbrella under some shade and have a cold one. Having those other options too for their guests that might be a DD. I think that's kind of overlooked sometimes too, especially with ticketed events, anniversary parties and such. People buy a DD ticket. Is there some fun there for the DD? You know, can they have some kombucha? Can they have some other options like that too?
Good insight there, Warren. I can think back to a beer fest I went to quite some time ago. It was a sour beer fest like a decade ago. It was a fantastic time. But the second time I went, it was the rainiest of days. And I would have loved to have a little shelter from that rain, or even like a brewery branded poncho I could use just to stay dry. So
Sure.
yeah, sun, rain, the things to think about.
I think a lot of times too, you know, just touching on kind of like the visuals of the event, decorating your tap room, getting all these props, all that kind of stuff, all that costs money. And, you know, sometimes if it's a smaller event, you might not have that in your budget. And one thing that's important with visuals is just the fact that it draws the eye because it's something different. And I think a lot of times working with vendor partners of different kind of creates that outcome without you having to spend money on it. So if you have, you know, a few local businesses throwing a table or a tent up to sell out of, sometimes just the difference on your footprint, or them catching it from down, you know, the street or whatever. Oh, what's that over there? That's kind of creating a visual. And a lot of times they put a lot of pride in how that looks and feels and stuff. So then that kind of adds to your vibe too. Like, you know, there's something really prideful to take out of it. And then it doesn't cost you money.
Love it. So speaking of not costing a lot of money, I know brewery owners and managers are always looking for affordable ways to get their message out there. And all of you have so much you want to say. You want to talk about your beer. You want to talk about your staff. You want to talk about your events and everything you have going on. What are you all's tips for finding that balance for, you know, getting your messaging out there with not overwhelming people, but also, you know, not underselling? Because you know, I don't want to see 10 posts from you on social media in one day. So how are you successfully, you know, letting people know about what you've got going on?
I think this goes into the organization side, right? You know, when we build out an event calendar with a brewery, or we build out a social calendar in general, you know, Andrew loves when I talk about Asana, because I believe in the organizational structure of that of some of those apps like that, where we can build some structure and we can build hey, here's our event. Okay, we're going to have this event on this date. Here's the next month's plan for social media, whether it's some of the event mentions, some of the regular things that have to be also talked about on social, and you can look at that as a whole, make sure that you have that balance. The other side is having an ad calendar to support that event. If you got the budget for it, make an ad calendar, because then you can be advertising your event on the side without having to bombard posts. And then the third thing I would advise is using an event page to post within, because as people grow on that event page, so I typically like to run an ad to an event page, get people to press interested or going to that event, and then push to them via that event page in a more frequent way. And then also, make sure that it's my other audience, my regular, timeline is got the event enough on it too. But if I got an ad running and I'm growing it from 100 to 1,000 people, then I got 1,000 people's attention every time I post. It notifies them, right? So I'm kind of, I don't have to bombard my timeline. I'm using stories. I'm using event pages.
Warren, you've got me curious when it comes to those event pages. We see the people who are interested, the people who check it. Maybe, is that reliable data? Can you base the RSVPs to plan anything for your event, or is it more so just, oh, that's interesting?
It depends on the event sometimes, right? Like I've seen it work really well where it was pretty dang close. I've seen it be a lot more people than what we were selling, but also, a lot of times it depends on how much you put into that event in terms of pushing that event page and advertising that event page. Because on occasion you can have, 1,000 or 4,000 people interested in the event, but did you need that many? Maybe you only had 800 and something tickets to sell. So then, that might not be accurate. But what I will say is the more people you get to that event page, the more likely you are to hit your ticket number, mainly just because now you got other people saying they're interested, and that lets their followers know, and their followers come and check it out. So the goal should be, if you have 1,000 people that you want to sell tickets to, aim for like 3,000. Right, and chances are you're going to hit your number. And not saying that you won't hit it at 1,000, but it's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be a lot closer.
Anyone else want to have any tips for marketing, kind of making sure you can get your messages out there?
I think a really important piece too is just like think about yourself as a consumer when you're scrolling on social media. Like what gets you to make your thumb stop? Like what makes you go, oh wait, what was that? And for me, a lot of times it's not seeing the same repetitive graphic for an event, or not seeing the same, story just being shared every single day from that brewery or event venue or whatever the case may be. So really kind of like, and this comes with planning, like Warren was saying, that really being mindful of, okay, I've got, the 1080 by 1080 version of my event poster. I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to do a picture from last year. Then I'm going to do a video that, so just making sure that you can post frequently about the same thing and not feel like you're bombarding, as long as the content feels different, even though it's kind of putting you all towards that same goal. And just 100% piggybacking off of getting people to that event page, because you don't have to throw out every single detail of the event on your overall post, but you can and should give them every single detail and more on the event page once they get over there.
Megan, you alluded to it, but you mentioned like documenting the event. What are your recommendations for, taking pictures, taking videos? Because if it's something you plan to do again, or just having your brewery's media kit, what kind of things do you like to have around?
So I have a SOP for every pretty much major event, whether it's recurring or quarterly or whatever, standard operating procedure. So, that kind of goes over everything that I should remember for next year. And I just kind of like touch base back on that, see if there's anything that needs updating, notes that change, as far as, oh, well, this was a different outcome because of weather or whatever. And then when it comes to graphics, as the marketing person and the event person here, I have over 25,000 images on my phone and videos on my phone. Folders are fantastic for that, because now that I have been here, a little close to 3 years now, I am kind of finding that like in my earlier days, I was like, where was that picture? Like I can remember the date of the event, but maybe for some reason the picture is kind of, secular from the event or separated from the event. So now I'm like trying to stay, in that mindset of like, okay, the event just ended. Swipe every single photo, video you took and create a folder right now before you forget and before it happens again next year and you're looking for everything. And then you can clean it up later, right? Because you're going to have 50 still images of the same exact thing. Just, take your time to clean it up later and figure out what's going to be used for next year.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that imagery. That way you can sell the next event and put it out there to all your followers.
Yeah, because a lot of times too, you might be the only one that knows that it was from, the previous time or 2 years ago or whatever. So even something that recurs like trivia, like you might be the only one that knows that it was from 2 years ago, and it's still evergreen in that situation.
I swear by it, but people love pictures of people with smiling faces.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that resonate the most that I found. Does anybody want to prove me wrong on that one? Anyone else have any kind of imagery that you really enjoy putting out there on the internet to promote things?
Dropping
smiling faces.
What did you say, Anthony?
People love smiling faces. You're right. I mean, anytime you put a bartender in there, a lot of people, regulars especially, be like, "Oh, I know them." Yeah. You know what I mean? Hey, I saw you on that post the other week.
Yeah, our team hates it here, but when I highlight their birthdays, they hate it. But I'm like, people just love to see your smiling face on our social media. They go wild. So guess what?
They like
a beer does better than a beer in front of a wall on a bar with nothing in the background. Anytime, any day, just like a hand holding a beer. I know it's tough for social folks who are out there doing it all yourself, but like hang around until you got some people around you then and take a bunch of photos and get smiling faces and at least a dang hand every once in a while.
So we've talked about a lot of things today regarding events and, organizing events like this we've talked about today, the recurring to the big ones, can be potentially a full-time job for people at a brewery. And Megan, I know you're spending a very large chunk of your time on events. Like what % of your time are you doing anything wearing that event's hat?
I mean, it definitely changes with the time of year, but like I'm about to move into the time of year where it is very much 50-50 marketing, if not just a tiny bit higher on the events. And that's mainly because outside of the events that you're putting on as part of marketing to bring people in, we're also having to handle, the 40-person birthday party on a Saturday night, that kind of stuff. And that takes time. There's a lot more back and forth, and there's a lot more detail that goes into that sometimes than just saying, hey, let's shoot for 1,000 people here to get a flight of cookies, and so, yeah, it's definitely seasonal, but it's moving into that 50-50 range. I'm trying to get.
When would you recommend a brewery consider hiring someone to kind of take the lead on this almost as that full-time position?
I think it just depends on how committed they are to having that frequency, right? So there's a lot of breweries that they just want to say no to any request for a private gig. They are happy with trivia and nothing else, and that is fine. But then there's also ones that are like, we just want to try it all. I think that's when you probably need somebody to be in charge of it, because somebody has to stand there and throw the spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks, and that might not be you. So.
Okay, because you kind of set me up for this one. Like, how many times do you throw the spaghetti at a wall for an event before you say it's not working or we need to keep doing this?
Quite a bit. I've actually been throwing like an entire pot at the wall because we're not a big sports bar area. We've got a few TVs, but that's about it. And so, there's a aspect to the Super Bowl that I'm, toying in my head might bring a non-Super Bowl crowd to the Super Bowl party. So yeah, it's a lot of like, you're throwing spaghetti at the wall over the idea. Then you're throwing spaghetti at the wall over whether or not to do this in the execution of the idea or not. And then you're throwing it against the wall afterwards to say, should I even do it again? Was it even worth it? So yeah.
Anthony, what kind of procedures do you have in place for, how many times you'll do something before you kind of just say that adult prom did not work, or this pumpkin thing, we got to keep doing it? Like, what's your rule of thumb?
That's a good question. It's typically about 2 or 3 events is like enough to call it. You could generally tell pretty early on if it's going to catch steam or if it's not.
Good tip there. So, as we wind this conversation down, I'm thankful for all the insight you all have provided. But, I like to go back to Matt for a sec, just because I'm so fascinated by what we can learn from other industries, just kind of bringing it all together. What do you think are say the top 3 factors someone should think about when planning events? Are there any big ones that just jump out to you, which you'd like to reiterate?
Number one, everybody's mentioned planning a lot, and that was my big thing, which you guys are pros. That's why you're on here, right? So plan more than you think you should and have backup plans and communicate often on it. Pull your whole team together, whether it's, for me, I'm working hand in hand with marketing and then whoever's helping me at that event, making sure everybody's role is clear, constant communication, pre-show, during the show, post-show, metrics, all of that. So that's my number one. Number 2, I would say really focus on that atmosphere and just that positive mindset. Things are going to go wrong, and it's whether it's weather or anything that's going to go wrong, just make sure you roll with it. And the last thing you want to do is have a negative, feel within that event to where somebody picks up on that and you're toast, So no matter what, just know that things are going to happen, have your plan for it, but also just roll with it.
Love your positivity.
Yeah, laugh about it, or that's the only thing you can do in the moment. So, and then number 3, I would say have those other metrics other than ROI, because if you're just looking at that, it's easy to get down and say, "Oh, I'm out on this." If it's just not going to work this year, I'm out. But it takes, to Warren's point earlier, a second, third, fourth year until you really know. You got to do a little beta testing, whether it's price or whatever it is. Don't give up first time. Just take the best from it, learn from the worst, and reevaluate from there.
Good stuff, Matt. So I'm going to actually share from the private chat we've had going during this conversation, because there's some good insight I don't want all the listeners to miss out on. Warren suggests, if you got the Super Bowl party coming up, not saying Super Bowl, but the big game. So that's your football tip for today. Just call it the big game. You don't want to get in trouble. And Megan threw out a pretty good one. She wouldn't say Girl Scouts for our cookie and beer pairing, so they went with cookies of the scouting variety. So interesting choices there to kind of steer clear of anyone getting in trouble. Now I'd like to wind down with 3 rapid fire questions, and we're going to go in the same order we started with. So Megan, sorry to put you on the spot in a second, but we're going to go around the first time. I would love to hear your best event. Just shout out what it's called, literally no more than 5 seconds. I want to hear about your best event. Matt, for you, it can be something you've attended or helped create yourself. So first question, best event, Megan, what is it?
Hands down, Oktoberfest. The first year we did it, we tried to make it a citywide thing, and we definitely accomplished it.
Warren?
Craftathon Beer Festival. It's 100% nonprofit, but we take care of our brewery friends and sell out every year.
Shameless plug. Anthony?
It's got to be our anniversary party. It's like a reunion of everyone that's ever worked at the brewery comes back, every regular you could possibly see, and it's just like a great give back community kind of day for all of us.
Good times. And Matt?
Yeah, for me, it's our presence at CBC every year. We've got kind of a prime location, and location's everything for us to get visible, but pouring beer in the booth, and we've got some awesome ideas for this year, partnering with some people. And it's the whole, everyone's there. It's our best for sure.
See you in a couple of months. So you probably saw this coming. Worst event. Megan, go.
Paint and sip.
Paint and sip.
A lot of room.
A lot of room. Warren?
I don't know the answer to that one, because we haven't, for the brewery side, we haven't had any events yet. And everybody else.
What's an event you definitely don't want to do? Do you have the one you said, we'll never host this in our tap room?
I've got one that I'm a little bit hesitant on, and it's karaoke, just because I feel like it's very polarizing. So I'm pretty hesitant on karaoke. That would be what I would say.
Okay. Anthony?
Open mic nights. It is so uncomfortable to watch anybody bomb on stage. Me personally, I'm getting up immediately and walking out. I can't deal with that awkwardness.
Yeah.
So I was in Martinsville, Virginia, 15 years ago. They had karaoke at a bowling alley, and there was a person up on stage singing Sarah McLachlan's "In the Arms of an Angel." Yeah, we'll leave it at that. It was,
they were doing
one image that comes into your head when you hear that song.
It was fantastic in its own way. We'll just leave it at that. Matt, worst event? It could be something you've seen at a brewery. Just love to hear something you'd recommend avoiding.
No, I mean, the only thing that I don't put on events like you guys do as much. I'm usually, a vendor at them, but I took my hand at that about 6 years ago. I guess it's time for me to try again because I got to see what all it took. And, when you are in charge of the turnout and all those factors. So I don't know, maybe I need to try my hand there again. I'm used to like doing my part and showing up, but mad props to you guys who have to handle every single aspect and make sure the people show up and have a good time.
I'll be looking for the invite to your event. Now, final question. I always love for everyone listening to walk away with something they need to do right now. So I'd love to hear from all four of you. For anyone who's tuning in, what's one thing event related you believe they need to be focusing on right now?
Go boil that pot of spaghetti to throw against the wall. Try everything and anything once at least, but hopefully give it a few more tries than once. And stay organized. So before you even start brainstorming, figure out how you're going to keep it organized.
What's your favorite spaghetti sauce?
I'm a big proponent of vodka sauce.
Sounds good. Warren?
I'd say to take a notebook out, write down everything you're currently doing event-wise and that you want to do event-wise, big, medium, small events, and focus on how to build the best experience behind them. And then also how to make sure that you're maximizing what the goal is for them too, whether it's experience or dollar signs or whatever it is.
And Warren also recommends Asana for staying organized. And I tried to Google if Asana merchandise exists because I was going to buy you a shirt, but they don't have it on their store yet.
Nah. They need to pay me first.
Anthony?
My biggest tip would just be track your marketing spend, right? Don't just put QR codes on posters up in your tap room or on table tents. Actually have a link that shows how many people are taking photos of those or where your customers are coming from that's buying those tickets. A lot of people just slap them on and walk away. And also with discount codes, right? Doing competitions throughout each one of your bartenders. Give them their own discount code. Like have them reach out to their friends, give it out to friends so that way you can track and figure out where every single ticket's coming from and where that marketing spend is actually making sense and working.
I love that data. Thank you. Matt?
Mine's a little of the start with why type component. Like what is the real thing that you're trying to accomplish? It may not be ROI. It might be, getting new people there, whatever it is, but really start with why. And then everything you do pre-show and post, follow that route. Don't, I agree with the spaghetti on trying things, but if you're going to put a lot of time and money into it, make sure it aligns with your why and stay.
Well, Anthony couldn't give his book recommendations earlier. It wasn't safe for this session, but I think Matt threw a shout out to Simon Sinek's Start With Why, which is a great one. So for everyone joining today, I hope you found something that's going to help you better your events program at your brewery. And Megan, Warren, Anthony, and Matt, I appreciate all of your insight, and I'll see you in person hopefully before too long. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye. Take it easy. Thanks, guys.